Human, does the shape between my legs confuse you? Is that why you stare so oddly? The first official meeting between humans and the visitors from the stars was meant to be calm. It was held inside a wide, white hall built for peace talks. Soft lights glowed from the ceiling. Translation screens floated in the air. Human scientists, diplomats, and observers sat in long rows, trying very hard not to show their fear. At the center of the room stood the alien delegate. Her name was Zyra. She looked almost human, but not quite. Her skin carried a faint silver tone, like moonlight on metal. Her eyes were larger, dark, and reflective, moving slowly as they studied everything. Her hair fell in smooth strands that changed color slightly when she turned her head, reacting to light. Zyra was young by her people's standards, chosen not for strength or power but for curiosity. She was here to observe humans. From the moment she entered the room, Zyra noticed something strange. The humans were uncomfortable. Some avoided looking at her. Others stared too long and then quickly looked away. A few whispered quietly, their faces tight with confusion. Their body language made no sense to her. She tilted her head slightly, watching them the way a scientist watches a new species. Why are they tense? She wondered. Her species had evolved on a world where survival depended on openness. Hidden intentions often meant danger. Honest observation was respected. Questions were asked directly, without shame. Humans, however, felt like a locked door. As Zyra stepped forward, the sound of her boots echoed softly on the floor. The room fell silent. Every human eye turned toward her, then away again, except one. A human male stood near the back, part of the research team. He tried not to stare, but his eyes kept returning to her, then dropping again as if burned. Zyra noticed. She always noticed. She followed his gaze, tracking where his eyes paused, where his posture stiffened. The pattern repeated. Confusion formed in her mind. She did not feel threatened. She did not feel admired. The emotion coming from him was different, uncertain, awkward, almost afraid. That confused her most of all. Zyra raised her hand, a gesture she had learned meant she wished to speak. The translators activated at once. "I have a question," she said calmly. Her voice was smooth, clear, and emotionless, not cold but precise. The human leader nodded. "You may ask." Zyra turned slightly, her gaze settling on the man who had been staring. The room seemed to hold its breath. "Human," she said, pointing gently, not accusingly, "does the shape between my legs confuse you? Is that why you stare so oddly?" Silence exploded. Every sound vanished, no breathing, no whispers, no movement. The human's face turned red instantly. His heart raced. Several people gasped. Others froze in shock. A few looked away in panic, as if the question itself were dangerous. Zyra blinked. She did not understand the reaction. Her people asked questions like this all the time. Physical form was information. Differences were data. Curiosity was not insult, it was survival, but the humans reacted as if she had broken an invisible law. I'm sorry," the man stammered, stepping back. "I didn't mean," the human leader raised a hand quickly. "We'll take a short break." The lights dimmed slightly. The meeting paused. Zyra remained standing alone at the center of the room. Her chest felt tight, not fear, but something new. Did I cause harm? She wondered. Back on her homeworld, elders often said, when you study another species, their silence can be louder than their words. Now she understood. As the humans left the room, Zyra stayed still, replaying the moment in her mind. The tone of her voice, the choice of words, the sudden emotional shift in the humans. She had not intended offense. She had intended understanding. Moments later, a smaller group returned. Among them was the same human male. His name, she had learned earlier, was Ethan. He looked nervous but determined. "I've been asked to speak with you," he said carefully. Zyra nodded. "Very well." They moved to a quieter section of the hall. The space felt heavy with unspoken rules. "I did not mean to upset you," Zyra said honestly. "Your reaction suggests I violated a social boundary. I wish to understand it." Ethan exhaled slowly. Humans are complicated about bodies. Some things are considered private. Private, Zyra repeated. Information that must be hidden. Yes, Zyra frowned slightly. On my world, form tells history, environment, adaptation. To ignore it would be disrespectful. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. For us, staring can feel like judgment. Judgment implies intention, Zyra replied. I had none. I believe you, Ethan said quietly. That surprised her. She studied his face again. The fear was still there, but now mixed with effort to understand her. Zyra felt something shift inside her mind. Perhaps humans did not hide because they were weak. Perhaps they hid because they were vulnerable. I will try to learn your boundaries, she said. And I'll try to explain them better, Ethan replied. They stood in silence for a moment, not awkward this time, but thoughtful. Beyond the glass walls of the hall, Earth continued moving. Clouds drifted. People lived their lives, unaware that a single question had revealed how different two worlds truly were. Zyra looked back toward the empty meeting space. First contact, she realized, was not about technology or language. It was about learning where fear lived, and why. And this was only the beginning. The days after the meeting were quiet, but the silence felt heavy. Zyra remained inside the human research complex, a place built from glass, steel, and careful rules. Humans walked its halls every day, speaking softly when she passed, watching her with mixed feelings, fear, curiosity, and something like hope. She noticed everything. Humans were expressive but indirect. Their words often said one thing while their faces said another. Their silence carried meaning. Their pauses mattered. This confused her more than their technology. Ethan had been assigned as her cultural guide. At first, he kept a respectful distance, unsure how to behave. He spoke carefully, choosing words slowly as if they could break something invisible. Zyra noticed that too. Why do you measure your speech? She asked one morning as they walked through a garden inside the facility. Ethan blinked. I guess it's habit. Habit built from fear of error, she asked calmly. He smiled weakly. Yes, that sounds about right. Zyra considered this. On her world, words were tools. On Earth, words were also shields. They stopped near a pool of water. Zyra watched small fish move in patterns. Their behavior made sense. Humans did not. Your people reacted strongly to my question, she said. I have reviewed recordings. The emotional spike was intense. Ethan nodded. You touched something sensitive. Sensitivity implies pain, Zyra replied. What pain is connected to form? Ethan thought for a long moment. History, judgment, control, shame. Zyra turned to him slowly. Those concepts are inefficient, he laughed quietly. You're not wrong. As days passed, Ethan explained human customs, privacy, personal space, unspoken rules about staring, touching, asking. Zyra listened closely, absorbing everything. She learned that humans often assumed intent where none existed. That difference made them nervous. That being observed felt like being measured, and possibly rejected. This idea stayed with her. One evening, Zyra asked permission to observe human life outside the facility. Ethan agreed, though with concern. They walked through a city street. Lights glowed. Sounds filled the air. People moved quickly, wrapped in their own thoughts. Some noticed Zyra and froze. Others whispered. A few stared openly. Zyra felt the same tension as before, but now she recognized it. Fear of being seen. Why do humans hide even among themselves? She asked. Ethan hesitated. Because we're afraid of being judged, even by our own kind. Zyra processed this slowly. On her world, survival depended on being understood. On Earth, survival seemed to depend on blending in. Back at the facility, reports began spreading across human networks. The question she had asked was being discussed everywhere, often without context. Some humans claimed she was rude. Others defended her honesty. Many argued without listening. Zyra watched these discussions with growing unease. My presence has caused division, she said one night. Ethan looked tired. First contact always does. But the harm was unintentional, she replied. Is intent irrelevant to humans? He sighed. Sometimes. That troubled her. She met with human psychologists, sociologists, and leaders. Each explained a different part of the same truth. Humans were fragile. Not physically, but emotionally. Their history was filled with conflict over differences, over bodies, over identity. Zaira began to understand why her question had felt dangerous to them. It had reminded them of their own past. One afternoon, she requested a private session with Ethan. I need clarification, she said. Is it preferable that I limit my curiosity? Ethan looked surprised. No, but maybe adjust how you express it. Filter truth. Translate it, he corrected gently. Zaira considered this deeply. Her people valued truth above comfort. Humans valued comfort above clarity. Neither was wrong, but they were different. Later that day, a message arrived from Zaira's homeworld. Status uncertain. Human reaction volatile. Consider recall. Zaira stared at the symbols. Recall meant failure. It meant humans and her people would remain strangers, divided by fear and misunderstanding. She felt something unfamiliar tighten inside her. Not fear. Responsibility. She requested permission to speak publicly to humans openly. Many advised against it, but Ethan supported her. They need to hear you, he said, not the rumors, not fragments. Zaira stood alone that night looking out at Earth's sky. The stars were familiar yet distant. She realized something important. Humans were not afraid of her form. They were afraid of what it revealed about themselves. And if understanding was to grow, silence could no longer protect them. She turned away from the window. Tomorrow she would speak, not as an observer but as a bridge. And the outcome would change everything. The day Zaira was to speak publicly arrived with a tense silence that filled the human complex. News outlets, social networks, and political leaders had already discussed her question endlessly. Many people misunderstood her words. Some said she had been rude. Others defended her honesty. Rumors spread faster than the truth. Zaira observed it all calmly, though inside her mind, thoughts swirled like storm clouds. Ethan stood beside her. His hand rested lightly on the console that controlled the translation system. You're ready, he said quietly. No matter what happens, just speak as you are. Zaira nodded. Her species valued clarity, truth, and observation. They did not speak to hide their meaning. But here she had to weigh words carefully. The chamber filled quickly with humans. Scientists, journalists, diplomats, and observers sat in rows, some whispering nervously. Cameras and sensors floated in midair, recording every moment. Zaira stepped onto the stage. Her silver skin reflected the soft lights. Her large eyes scanned the crowd. Every face carried curiosity, tension, and fear. Humans, she began, her voice clear through the translators. I am Zaira. I observe your world because my people wish to learn from yours. I have asked questions you find uncomfortable. This has caused confusion, fear, and anger. A few people shifted in their seats. Murmurs passed quickly through the room. I wish to explain, she continued. My questions do not come from disrespect. They come from observation. Differences in form, your form, my form, do not carry judgment in my culture. They carry information, history, and survival. Some humans frowned. A few whispered to each other. Several cameras focused directly on her. Yesterday, she said, I asked a question about the shape between my legs. Many humans reacted as if I had insulted them. This was never my intention. I asked because I observed unusual behavior. I sought to understand, not to harm. Ethan watched closely. A few humans in the front row looked uncomfortable, but others leaned forward, intrigued. Your reaction, Zaira continued, tells me something important. Humans do not hide fear from strangers alone. You hide it from yourselves. You hide it because your past has taught you to protect your vulnerabilities, to avoid judgment, to survive in your social systems. A voice from the audience asked, Are you saying humans are weak? Zaira paused. No, weakness is survival without understanding. Humans are strong in ways my species does not yet fully comprehend. You have created systems to protect each other. You have built communities, laws, and empathy. Your fear is part of your strength if you can learn from it. The room was quiet. Many people nodded slowly. Others still seemed unsure. Zyra lowered her gaze slightly. I ask not for your approval, but for your understanding. Curiosity is not disrespect. Questions are not judgments. My people will remember your words, your actions, and your honesty. Do you wish to remember only silence, or do you wish to understand each other? For a moment, no one moved. Then a soft murmur spread. Some humans whispered among themselves as if a veil had been lifted. Ethan smiled faintly. You're making them think, he whispered. Zyra nodded. It is what I hoped. Later, when the speech ended, small groups approached her. Some thanked her for her honesty. Others asked more questions carefully, politely. A few were still cautious, but curiosity replaced most of the initial fear. But the controversy had not disappeared entirely. Media outlets continued discussing her original question. Headlines used partial quotes, making her seem brash or confrontational. Zyra reviewed the reports. She realized that understanding required effort on both sides. Humans had to listen, not just read snippets. She could not control perception entirely. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. They are learning, slowly, but they are learning. Zyra studied him. He was young but determined, brave in ways different from her own species. She felt respect for humans growing within her. That evening, she walked alone through the city streets with Ethan. The sky was dusky, clouds painted in soft reds and golds. Humans moved past them, unaware of how much their species had changed in understanding because of a single question. Do you think they will ever fully understand? Ethan asked. Understanding is not immediate, Zyra replied. Even my people take centuries to understand a single trait of another species, but the effort is the beginning. They paused near a park. Children played on swings and slides, their laughter clear and pure. Zyra observed them carefully. In your youth, she said softly, you are open to questions. You learn quickly. Fear is smaller. Boundaries are not rigid. Ethan looked at the children and nodded. That's why we hope for the future. They may grow to accept new ideas easier than we do. Zyra considered this. Perhaps your species' fear is not weakness. Perhaps it is preparation for growth. They returned to the facility in silence. The city lights glimmered like scattered stars on Earth, reminding her of her own homeworld. The next day, Zyra's presence was requested in a panel discussion, with leaders from both her species and humans. Diplomats debated fiercely, worried that misinterpretation could harm interstellar relations. One human diplomat spoke angrily. We cannot allow such direct questions to pass without context. It could offend millions. Zyra replied calmly. Intent must be considered. If one studies form to understand, one should not be judged for seeking knowledge. Judgment without understanding is a failure in communication. The room fell quiet again. Some leaders muttered under their breath. Others nodded, acknowledging her point. Ethan leaned toward her and whispered, You may have changed more than you realize. Zyra studied the humans carefully. Perhaps, but I must also change. I must translate my curiosity into a language they can understand without fear, not hiding my truth but framing it with their understanding. Later, she reflected on the events. She realized that curiosity, even when honest, could create conflict if the other party did not share the same cultural framework. Yet conflict was not failure, it was opportunity. She would continue her observations, continue her questions, but now she would do so with empathy. For the first time, Zyra saw humans not as puzzles to solve, but as equals to understand. And the world she observed slowly began to look back at her, not with fear, but with curiosity in return. The day after the panel, Zyra awoke early. The sun had just begun to rise over the city, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. She stood by the window of her temporary quarters, watching humans move through their routines, some rushing, some lingering, some laughing. She thought about her journey since arrival. The first meeting, the question that had shocked them, the lessons she had learned, and the conflict that had followed. It had been a whirlwind, but she now understood one vital truth. Understanding was not immediate. It took patience, repetition, and empathy. Ethan arrived holding a small tray of food. He smiled, though the stress of the past days lingered on his face. "Good morning, Zyra," he said. "The team wants to hear from you again today. They have more questions about your people, your culture, and your world." Zyra tilted her head, considering. "I am ready. I have learned that sharing information, even when it makes others uncomfortable, is necessary. But I must also consider how it is shared." Together, they walked to the assembly hall. Humans had gathered again, some journalists, some scientists, and some curious onlookers. There was an energy in the room, different from before, less fear, more attention. Zyra stepped forward. Her silver skin glimmered under the soft lights. She took a moment to breathe, observing the humans. She saw hesitation, yes, but also openness. "I wish to speak today," she began, "not to provoke, not to confuse, but to help understanding grow." She paused, letting the words sink in. "When I asked my first question, the one about the shape between my legs, it startled many of you. It was not intended to shock nor to disrespect. It was an observation, a way to understand your reactions, your culture, your history. That question was a mirror. What you saw in it was not me, it was yourselves." A soft murmur passed through the audience. Some nodded, others sat back, thoughtful. "On my world," Zyra continued, "form tells stories. Survival, adaptation, growth. There is no shame in questions. There is no hiding truth. But I have learned that your world is different. For you, questions can feel like judgments. Understanding requires trust. Honesty must be balanced with empathy." Ethan watched as the crowd shifted, leaning in. Even those who had criticized her now listened with attention. "I do not ask you to abandon your customs," Zyra said. "I ask you to consider that curiosity is not threat. Questions are not judgment. We are different, yes, but we can still understand each other." A young human woman raised her hand. "Zyra, if curiosity is not threat, then how do we learn from your species without misunderstanding? How do we communicate truth without offense?" Zyra smiled softly. "By observing carefully, listening deeply, and approaching differences with patience. By recognizing that fear is not weakness but protection, and by remembering that even silence carries meaning." Another human man spoke. "Do you think humans and your species can truly understand each other?" Zyra considered. "Yes, but only if both sides are willing to look beyond appearances. Understanding is not about form, it is about intent. It is about empathy, patience, and trust. Today, you have taken the first step by listening. Tomorrow, you may take the next step by trying to see through the eyes of another species." Silence filled the hall. It was a different silence this time, calm, reflective, and full of possibility. Ethan stepped forward. "Zyra has taught us something important, that honesty and curiosity, when guided by respect, can create bridges, not barriers." Some humans nodded, some whispered among themselves, some even smiled. The tension of the past days seemed to lift, replaced by a shared sense of hope. Later, outside the hall, Zyra and Ethan walked through the garden again. The city hummed around them, full of life. "I feel something has shifted," Ethan said. "Not just among humans, but with you as well. You've changed how we see ourselves." Zyra looked at him, eyes reflective. "And I have changed too. I have learned that truth alone is not enough. Understanding requires translation, not of words but of meaning. To share knowledge, I must consider the perspective of the other. That is a lesson humans have taught me." Ethan nodded. "And humans can learn from you too, about curiosity, honesty, and courage." For the first time since her arrival, Zyra felt a sense of peace. The conflict that had seemed so urgent had transformed into opportunity. Humans were learning, and she was learning alongside them. That evening, she climbed a small hill outside the city. From there, she could see the horizon stretch endlessly, the sun dipping low into the distance. The stars above seemed closer than before. She thought of her homeworld, of her people, and of the countless species waiting in the galaxy. And she understood that this was only the beginning of many lessons, many exchanges, many bridges. Zyra reflected on the question that had caused so much attention. She realized it had never been about discomfort, but about honesty and observation. She realized humans had their own fears and boundaries, and that respecting them did not mean hiding her own truth. She smiled. Tomorrow, she would continue her work. She would observe, ask questions, and share knowledge. She would guide humans to see beyond their assumptions, and in return, she would learn their ways, their fears, their hopes. And perhaps one day, the question that had startled so many would not create shock, but understanding. Because true understanding begins when both sides stop assuming intent, stop hiding behind appearances, and begin to see the world through each other's eyes. Zyra turned her gaze to the stars, feeling a deep connection, not just to her people, but to the humans she now called allies in curiosity. She knew there would be more questions, more challenges, and more misunderstandings. But she also knew that the bridge had been built. And on that bridge, two species could finally meet, not as strangers, not as judge and judged, but as learners together, exploring the vast, complex world around them. The wind brushed softly against her face, carrying the quiet promise of a future filled with understanding. She breathed deeply, her silver eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. And somewhere deep inside she felt hope, because she had asked a question, observed a reaction, and learned more than she ever imagined. And the humans, slowly, carefully, thoughtfully, had begun to understand her, not completely, not yet, but enough to begin. And that was all that mattered.